Brought to you by FranklinCovey. This is Great Life, Great Career. Now back to the show. Here's your host, Scott Miller.
Welcome back, everyone. Our theme today is navigating the path that leads to financial security. In our opening segment, I mentioned that each week we have a different theme. And this week, although our topic is aimed at everyone in the audience, our guest is Jean Chatzky, the famed author, financial editor, and host on the Today Show program at NBC for nearly 25 years, who has written many books on this topic of personal finance. But her most recent book, coming out in March, is called Women with Money. And I mentioned it has a fairly long but exciting tagline called The Judgment-Free Guide to Creating the Joyful, Less Stressed, Purposeful, and yes, rich life you deserve. Jean Chatzky, welcome to Great Life, Great Career.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, I struggled with that subtitle, but every time I took something out of it, I really wanted it back in, so I just left it all.
You know, Jean, I mentioned in our opening segment that this topic of personal finance addresses everyone. Although this book is written towards women, I read it, and my wife and I have discussed it for several hours. It's a great book for men to read if they're fathers, if they're uncles, if they're in any kind of advisory role in their family, as well as just grandfathers. I mean, any leader. Jean, I know that as leaders in organizations, all of us are increasingly aware that we can't divide our employees' lives, that our personal lives and our professional lives become increasingly intertwined. My sense is that the level of stress that people bring into the workplace around their personal finances is not lessening, it's probably increasing. What would you say about that?
I would say you're right on the nose. So Stanford University Center for Longevity did some research into this a couple of years back, and what they found was that the average person has 4 stressful life events every single year, and they could be good things like having a baby or getting married. Both are great, both are stressful, but they can be bad things too, like getting divorced, losing a job, getting downsized, having a parent that you need to care for. And the difference between having the tools and the skills to manage these events in our lives really takes a toll on our finances, our health, our sleep, our overall well-being. And we can't separate them from our work lives anymore because we are increasingly bringing our work home with us through our devices. And by the same token, we have to bring life to work because we can't shut that off either.
I think it's as relevant now as it's ever been, especially when you've got two, perhaps, parents or two spouses or partners working in the workplace, managing different types of incomes and assets and needs and such. Jean, you've had an amazing career. This is not your first book. You've written many books, generally around health and wealth and finances. And you are the financial editor of the Today Show, where you've been for almost 25 years. I mean, you've outlasted several hosts, including recently. Spend a couple of minutes and give us an insight on what is it like to be part of that endearing Today Show family.
Oh, it has just been an incredible gift to me. I mean, it is a family. It does feel like a family. The many of the producers and the stage managers have been there as long, if not longer, than I have. And it's a place where they really, everybody works to make the best show that they can every single day. For me, it's just been the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, I know that many, many doors in my life, whether it's to write books or to give lectures or to host a podcast, have opened because of my involvement at Today, and so I'm really grateful for that.
Jean, like you, I read a lot of books in the course of my role at FranklinCovey as the Executive Vice President of Thought Leadership, and it seems like there's 4, or probably more, but 4 evergreen topics where there'll be hundreds, if not thousands, of more books written around diets, finance, leadership, and I might say even like culinary cookbooks. Why do you think there can never be enough information out there to consume around personal finance?
Because it's always changing. That the amount of responsibility that we have been asked to take on for our personal finances has just grown and grown and grown over the 25 years that I've been following the industry. I mean, I came along at around the same time that 401ks came along and that pensions went away, and we were all of a sudden asked to step up and not just save money during our work life, but manage that money and put it somewhere where it could support us in retirement. And healthcare has been the same story. You know, we used to have healthcare provided by the job, and we knew that we would get it largely until we died. Now we're being asked whether we get it through our employers or whether we don't, to pay more for it every single year. The investment landscape changes, the tax landscape changes, and we are also different as human beings. You know, we're living a lot longer. That means we have to make our money last a lot longer. That's true for women in particular. And we receive financial information and use financial technology in different ways. So I think we need new books to keep up with the changing world. I wrote this book right now because women are coming into more power and more money than ever before. By 2030, women will control 2/3 of the wealth in the United States. I mean, that is a big deal and a big statement, especially when you look at the fact that many of us, whether we've got $1,000 or $100,000, still tie ourselves up into knots about how we manage that money because we are not confident.
We're talking today with Jean Chatzky, the award-winning personal finance journalist, the financial editor of NBC's Today Show, and the author of the new book, Women with Money. Jean, we're going to have two discussions today. Our first discussion, I think, is going to center around what I would kind of call the first almost third of your book, the first couple of chapters, which focus on your money story. Would you talk a little bit about the gravitas and the importance of understanding our own personal journeys and narratives around what we were taught or led to believe, understand around the role money plays in our lives?
Sure. So if you've spent any time thinking about your money, you've probably realized that you make decisions about it that are based in emotion, that maybe you know are not necessarily by the numbers the right thing to do for you or for your family. Chances are you do that because of either human nature or because of your money story, what some people call your money script, which is basically the way you were raised around money. It's not what people tried to teach you. It's not when somebody taught you to balance a checkbook, which you may or may not do anymore. It's not when your parents put those 3 jars on your dresser and told you to save a little bit, spend a little bit, and give a little away to charity. It's much more, what was the atmosphere like in your house growing up around money? Was there tension? Was there joy? Were there arguments? Were there doors that were shut, but you knew there were fights going on behind them? Kids don't miss a thing. And all of this seeped in. And the result is that you became an adult with this baked into your fiber. And if you haven't figured out what it is and how it affects you, you probably are not managing your money as effectively as you could be.
You know, Jean, your book had a profound impact on me personally. I read it just prior to going down just last week and having a visit with my parents. I'm from Orlando, Florida. I was in Miami. I drove up and spent a morning with them. And we sat down and had kind of the once every couple of year financial talk. And I was delighted at how on top of my parents, my father's in his mid-80s, we sat down and talked about the money in his mutual fund, how much its income is from his sources, where his money is in different portfolios. And I was pleased with how well they are on top of their money. Do you find that that's a generational issue? Do you think people that are, kind of post-boomer tend to be more disciplined, or are there any insights there?
I think you're really fortunate. I think you're really fortunate in that your parents were willing to talk to you about it, and that your parents seem to have such a great faculty with it.
Right.
There are a lot of people of your parents' age and my parents' age who are struggling. And, for a variety of reasons. They took on too much debt. They took on debt for their kids or their grandkids to put them through school. They lost money during the Great Recession. I mean, they're just a laundry list of things. The one of the big concerns that women especially have is, how am I going to help my parents? And unless we have these conversations, you can't know how much help your parents might need. So it's a great thing that you did it.
Well, I didn't take no for an answer, because I think it's important to have, a good perspective on it. When I read your book, I especially loved the part in chapter 2 about understanding your money story and how it affects you to this day. I have visceral memories of being raised, 6, 7 years old, of watching my mother put the paycheck into like 8 or 10 envelopes, like literally cash in envelopes on her desk. My father was the sole income earner. My mother was a homemaker. She managed the money, which I liked because I think it helped to balance the power out in our home. But I remember, to this day, watching my mother put money in the church envelope, in the food envelope, in the gas envelope, in the vacation envelope. And I think that to some extent had an impact on my own, financial discipline now. What advice would you give people as they're starting to uncover their financial story, how to kind of unpack it and leave what's bad and keep what's good?
Yeah, you need to think about what do you remember about how money was treated when you were a child? What do you remember about the emotion around money? Think about your parents as separate individuals, because often they came from very, very different places. And then ask yourself, and they're in the book, a series of questions about, all right, now that I know this, how does this impact, how is this shaping how I manage money to this day? We've got a lot of stories from a lot of real women in the book about the fact that, they grew up in homes where money was thrown at problems in an attempt to solve them. And to this day, they throw money at problems in an attempt to solve them, whether it was making a child feel like they belonged by getting them the right backpack, or many other things like that. I think that we need to reflect on what happened in our own childhoods, and how did that make us more or less able to deal with the swings in our own financial lives as they come and go. For me, I remember my father was a college professor. He was the primary breadwinner. My mother sort of dipped in and out of the workforce. She was a teacher, and she substituted sometimes, but he earned most of the money, but she managed it. And I know that she enjoyed it. She not only did the budgeting, she did the investing. He didn't really want to do it, but he was her sounding board. And for me, having a powerful woman role model who understood how to invest, I think brought me a long way in feeling that I was capable of doing this.
Jean, before we go to break, I want to have you talk a bit about your own financial vulnerability and fears. You've written multiple best-selling books on the topic. You're a renowned, TV expert and celebrity on the topic. But in your book, you're quite vulnerable about how in your marriage and with your children, everything's not perfect and buttoned down and talked about. Share how you can still have expertise about it and still have some holes to fill.
Yeah, without question. I don't particularly like to talk about money with my spouse. We do it. We schedule it so that we actually have these conversations. But sometimes they're tense, sometimes they're fraught. We're at slightly different places in our lives. My husband is 8 years older than I am. He retired from his longtime job last year. I am working as much, if not more, than I've ever worked in my life, and I enjoy it, and I don't want anyone, even him, to tell me to slow down. But, those sorts of things seep into financial conversations and can cause tension. I do it because I know I have to do it. We have to do it. It's important for our marriage that we that we have joint goals that we can focus on and that we can work toward together, because that's the romance in life. But it doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean that we're always going to agree. But that doesn't give anybody an excuse to abdicate.
We're talking today with Jean Chatzky, the host of the podcast Her Money with Jean Chatzky on iTunes, and the author of the new book Women with Money, the judgment-free guide to creating the joyful, less stressed, purposeful, and yes, rich life you deserve. When we come back after break, we'll talk a little bit about the rest of the book. What is her advice on some general investing guidelines, and how do we talk to our kids about the story we're leaving them on our own personal journey? You're listening to Scott Miller. This is Great Life, Great Career. We'll be back shortly.